The 2026 FIFA World Cup was supposed to be a football tournament, but it turned into an event that sent millions of European visitors home, fundamentally changed. Social media has been overtaken by a wave of content that nobody in the American media had predicted, and nobody in the European media knew how to explain. Reaction videos from British, German, French, and Scottish fans. Goodbye videos filmed in Texas motel rooms and Florida hotel lobbies. Fans crying in rental cars on highways outside Los Angeles. And a phrase that became the unofficial hashtag of an entire generation's reckoning with a country they had written off. We owe America an apology. This is what actually happened. For most Europeans, decades of news coverage had constructed a very specific picture of America. Crime on every corner. Guns everywhere. Rude people shouting about politics. One British fan, speaking to camera the night before his flight home, described the gap between expectation and reality as the biggest shock of his adult life. He said the media in Europe portrays America as this absolutely insane place where it's just problems and issues. But it's not true. We've traveled extensively in the States, and we know there is no friendlier people in the world. There is no greater degree of hospitality we've ever experienced. He had visited 83 countries. America, he said, was unlike any of them. Not because of what it had built, because of how its people made strangers feel. A French tourist, filming himself walking through an American city at midnight, could barely contain what he was experiencing. He said, "I'm a French person in America for the World Cup. Number one, there are actually nice people in America. I didn't know that America had nice people. Number two, I walked down the street and it was perfectly safe. I thought people would be dying in the street like there was a civil war, but no." He had expected a war zone. He had found a city where strangers held doors open and asked how his day was going. Every European who visited America has a version of the same story. The story is always about a stranger. Someone they did not know, will never see again, who did something for them purely because they were there. In Boston, a Scottish family arrived at a market to discover their lunch had already been paid for by the customer next to them. In Texas, a police officer at a convenience store was buying food for tourists because they were visitors in his city. In a shop, a European tourist who had no intention of buying anything was given a guided tour, a long conversation, and a commemorative patch just for walking in. One English fan, who had spent time in America before, tried to explain what it was that Europeans were actually experiencing when they encountered this. He said, "It is not the food. It is not the amazing locations. I promise you it is the people. They are just on another level of happiness." One of the most common things I've said about American people is that they seem to just be happier to be alive. Every time I meet an American, they just seem happier than everybody else to be alive. A Finnish visitor, describing being called sweetheart by an American waitress she had never met, captured something Europeans had not expected to feel. She said, "In Finland, it would be very invasive to call somebody a sweetheart that you don't know. But honestly, I love this about you guys. I don't even care if you mean it. I will take it as truth. You think I'm so sweet. Let's just be nice to each other." Europeans are trained to be suspicious of warmth from strangers. In America, the warmth kept arriving whether they were ready for it or not. By the third week, most of them had stopped being suspicious. They had started doing it themselves. Europeans who arrived cold, reserved, and politely skeptical were being rewired by their environment. By the time they got on the plane home, they were smiling at strangers in departure lounges. And the departure lounges were not smiling back. That was when it hit them. Beyond the people, America deployed its second weapon, sheer, overwhelming, logic-defying scale. The food arrived first. A British fan picked up what he assumed was a starter at a Texas restaurant and stared at it. He said this could feed a whole family. And that was just the starter. Texas brisket, smoked for 12 to 20 hours over oak wood, became the culinary breaking point for hundreds of thousands of European visitors. One British fan, after his first bite, was so overwhelmed he described it as a religious experience. Then there was ranch dressing, which Europeans had dismissed as an American eccentricity and discovered was, in fact, liquid gold. Free refills, which Europeans treated as a civilizational breakthrough. Chick-fil-A sauce, which was being smuggled out of the country in checked luggage. Peaches in Georgia that were twice the size and 3 times the flavor of anything available in Europe. The infrastructure delivered its own series of shocks. A German tourist, discovering that American buildings had functional air conditioning in summer, looked directly at the camera and said, "If you did not know, in Germany there's no AC at all. AC in Germany stands for a crime. It doesn't stand for air conditioning. Wide highways, grocery stores the size of shopping centers, drive through everything." And then in San Francisco, a self-driving car. A British tourist climbed in and spent the entire journey in a state of delighted terror. And then the landscapes. Colorado, California, Texas rivers with turtles. Yosemite, a woman on a bicycle in Snow Canyon State Park, in the middle of a red desert, unable to continue filming because she had happy tears in her eyes. Within weeks of the tournament, a specific phrase began appearing across platforms. Words that summed up everything. They said, "We owe America an apology." One British creator, who had documented his World Cup trip across multiple cities, addressed his American viewers directly. It was said that the UK and the rest of Europe owe America one big apology. For years, Americans had been mocked, portrayed as stupid, and their country described as unsafe and unfriendly. Their patriotism was questioned, and their love for their country was ridiculed. But now, with people traveling to America for the World Cup and experiencing it firsthand, thousands of videos are being shared by Brits, Dutch, and Germans praising how friendly Americans are, how clean the country is, and how incredible the atmosphere has been. The apology wave was not manufactured. It was the spontaneous output of millions of people who had arrived with a specific mental image of a country and had encountered something entirely different. The image had been constructed over years by news coverage that selected for conflict, dysfunction, and division. And when these tourists went home, a term that began circulating on social media was coined organically by thousands of people trying to describe the same experience at the same time: the post-American depression. They were not missing just a place. They were missing a feeling. The feeling of a city that had opened its arms and said, simply and genuinely, "You are welcome here." And that is why the airports were full of people who could not explain to customs officers why their eyes were red and teary. They had just left America, and somehow it felt like they were leaving home.